Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a brand new Nottingham Forest podcast hosted by myself, Greg Oram, and fellow Forest fan from across the Atlantic, Richard Spray. Now, if you're finding us for the first time, this is a bit of a companion piece to go with our very first official episode that has just been released as well. We were joined by our very special guest from Forest Focus, Matt Davies, where we discussed his own podcast, chatted over an assessment of the Forest season, as well as a few other bits too. Massive thanks to Matt for giving us some of his valuable time. And we do very much hope that you'll go and have a listen to that as well. Right. In this add-on to that first episode 1, Richard and I will share our own Forest stories, discuss the potential move away from the City ground, our hopes for next season, and also a few ideas on who Forest might target as new signings. Plus, there's Richard's brand new regular lightning round, and we'll go all Maverick and include an NFR, a not Forest related segment as well. Right, let's get on with things. Richard, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm feeling really excited about everything. We've been building up to getting episode 1 launched for a few weeks now since we first came together. How are you feeling about the whole journey that we're about to embark on with Talking Reds?
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations that every time we kind of continue to progress, every time we continue to move forward with with Matt, the episode with Matt, as well as what we're doing here, it just gets more and more exciting for the prospect of what we can do to try to continue to build relationships with the fan base and continue to have them come on and be part of this and, make it their journey as much as it is our journey, and I think that's one thing that I'm really looking forward to. And I'm continue to just, my excitement level continues to elevate with every passing day. So feeling good.
Fantastic. And as we said with Matt, and we want to make it clear, we very much know and understand that all Forest fans are equal, right? So all opinions count. Everyone's got their own opinion. And just because we've decided to do our own YouTube channel and podcast, right, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're elevated in terms of having a better opinion than others. We don't think that. We want to hear opinions from as many different people as possible. We're certainly not at all ever going to try and copy Forest Focus or any of the other podcasts. We would fail dramatically if we tried to do that. As we said with Matt, we've loved watching Forest Focus before, of course, when it was Garibaldi Red, and we've been members of that particular podcast since that opened up. I think we both tune in every single time it's on. Matt does an amazing job with a fantastic set of guests and a superb panel. And so we will continue to support Forest Focus to the hilt. We're fully behind Matt and fully behind his team and what they're doing on that podcast. What we're going to try and do here on Talking Reds is something a little bit different. We're not going to be certainly nowhere near out as frequently as that particular podcast. We do maybe 2 a month, maybe 1 more if it comes to it. We've both got full-time jobs that we have to try and give some of our attention to. So we just haven't got the time to do it as frequently as perhaps we would really want to. But it's just a way of us, or for us, to scratch the itch of being on a podcast, because I did it with a few times being on Forest Focus, and it was really, really good fun. And putting out opinions is a bit daunting sometimes, especially when you start getting a bit of abuse. So get ready for some of that. But what I would say to anybody listening is, you might not like what I've got to say. You might not like what you hear from Richard, and that's absolutely fine. But we also want to hear what you've got to say. So we hope people will join in comments when we go out live. We hope people will drop us DMs and messages. We're going to be looking for different people to come on as guests. We want to reach into the fan base. We're going to be using Twitter, or X as it's now called, as a little bit of a stalking ground to come and find you. So if you're on there with a an opinion, a daily opinion, as maverick or as controversial as it may be, then we may come knocking on your door and asking you to come on here and have a chat with us, just to have a debate, just to put your opinions forward. We're all Forest fans. We all want the same thing. We all want the best thing for Nottingham Forest. We love our club and we're all on the same side, aren't we? But there will be differences of opinion. And hopefully, if you're forthright and if you have to have something you want to say and you want to get it off your chest, then this is going to be hopefully the podcast for you. Right. Before we get on to anything else, it's become very clear to me with that accent, Richard, that you're clearly not from Nottingham. So I have to ask you the question, launching into finding a bit more out about you and your Forest story. Why Nottingham Forest and how did that all start?
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked a little bit, but we basically it really begins with my granddad and just his obsession and love for the club. And he's born and raised in Nottingham, lived a good portion of his life in West Bridgford and then Radcliffe on Trent. My mother, same thing. She's not nearly the fan that we are, but it just became apparent from a young age, especially in terms of playing the game, growing up, loving it, and then finding a love for it from a viewing standpoint, watching it standpoint, studying it standpoint, to get better in my own ability to play the game. But he really helped, I think, facilitate that. He really helped kind of mentor me in that way, and then it really matriculated into me loving the Forest. And so, as a child, back in the day when you'd write letters, right? You'd write letters. He'd have a little blurb at the end of the letter where he would give a little update. Because at the time it was like there was no internet, there was nothing that really allowed you to stay connected, tapped in to what was going on in the Premier. Or well, at the time there was no Premier League, but really stay sort of vigilant on the comings and goings of the club and other clubs. And so he was his way of just kind of building that relationship with me. We're not the same personality wise. We're not anything alike that way, but it was something that we both began to or I began to love, and he had loved since he was a child himself. And so he really fostered that in me, and he's done that with other family members as well, including my cousin, who loved playing football and loves the club. So yeah, it really just begins with him. And then, as a child living in the US most of my life, clearly, and then moving over to the UK when I was about 12, almost 13 years old, and getting a chance to experience that, going to City Ground, being able to see the club live just elevated everything about how much I love the game and how much I love the city and how much I love Nottingham Forest. So, I got to meet Brian Clough. That literally the first game I ever went to, I got to meet him, which is a remarkable experience. He wasn't the most talkative because it was, a couple hours before the match. So he clearly was not focused on talking to me. He was focused on what was coming. And ironically, it was against Luton, right? Our suddenly developed rival. So it was just an incredible experience for me, every aspect of it. And so he really was the catalyst to all of that. And, I can't even articulate, how much he loved Nottinghamshire, how much he loved that city. There was rarely a time where he wasn't there, and he was a season ticket holder for almost 50 years. So I feel like in a lot of ways, this is an honor of him. It's a reverence to what mattered to him and what was sacred to him. And so that's kind of been my sort of genesis of coming to know Nottingham Forest, even being so far away. Even, now since, the 90s when the internet came into existence, being able to spend a lot of time getting familiar with some of the history, especially the recent history, and being more connected to the club as a whole and who's playing for us, who's managing us, what's going on with us. It's been a blessing. And so I like I said, it's really an honor of him and continuing that legacy that he started.
And I think you mentioned you were moved back to the States after just a few years living in Norwich. I think you mentioned to me off air. And so you've been back over in the US. How easy has it been then for you to access Forest or content or any other kind of UK sports content over there? Because obviously you mentioned the internet wasn't around until the last 20 years or so. So how easy has it been for you to stay in touch with the club and the news of the team and stuff like that?
I mean, with streaming services, especially now, right? Because when we were in the championship, I could I'll go on ESPN on the app on television, right? And I could pick those games up and watch them, and I watched every game. Especially when we were in the championship, I was able to view that consistently, and obviously with the creation of YouTube as well, just being able to kind of get quick, easy access to extended highlights and other things too, which has really been my way of dipping more into the history of the club and getting into some of the older, squads that we've had and getting familiar with that. But yeah, it's been infinitely easier just by virtue of having those streaming services, having those different apps, to the point of which it's probably, I probably spend too much time on it. And I need to probably scale that back a little bit, but ultimately, that's been that. I think that the sort of evolution from where I was, because like I mentioned, if I talk to him on the phone, if we got a letter, generally speaking, we always had our for lack of better words, segment of time where we just talked about Forest, or through Facebook Messenger. We would talk about how the club's doing because he liked to talk about it, and he liked to, especially, I think he found it just like we find something like this for him to be cathartic, right? To get things off your chest, because obviously up until, even in recent times, it's a lot of futility and a lot of frustration. So he took that moment through Facebook Messenger, or through FaceTime or whatever, to share with me how he was feeling about things, so we could have that chat. And so, but yeah, it's been monumentally easier to do over the last 30 years.
Fantastic. It's
Yeah.
interesting because I know that you're in the States, and so you're much further away from Nottingham than I am. But having never lived in the city myself, I wasn't born there. I got Forest from my dad. He was raised in Hucknall, just outside, on the outskirts, if you like, as many listeners will know. And so he grew up following Forest, and went to a few county games as when he was younger as well, as I think quite a lot of people of his generation did. But it was really Nottingham Forest for him. So we always lived away. He was in the Navy, and I was born and raised South Coast, living in naval ports, different naval ports, ending up in Gosport. So I never had that team on my doorstep. And so it's always been really special because they've been out of reach, if you like. And I remember the second final of the European days, just about, I think I was 6. And it just attached itself to me. The club attached itself to me like a bug. My dad was passionate, which made me passionate. And so I think a lot of people that I know of, certainly, they often inherit the football team from their fathers, or from their family members, or from a grandfather, as in your case. And that's where I think our club is special as well. We're not on our own. It would be really silly to say that we're on our own. And I really value every single person supporting their team. Because if everyone supported the same team, we'd all have a load of Man United fans in the country, and that would be that. Because they're the ones that seem to attract all the Londoners and all the people from all over. But I think what I'm trying to say is that I've met Derby fans when I've been up visiting family in the sort of Nottinghamshire area at functions and stuff like that. I had a really good debate with a Derby fan a couple of years ago about all kinds of things, and it was really, really good to get into it. And I wanted him to support his club. I wanted him to be passionate about his club, because I'm passionate about my club. And Wolves fans and Portsmouth fans and Wigan fans and Blackpool fans and any other fan across the country, they're passionate about their club. And it's in the blood. And I got it from my dad. And I've given it to my son now. We live in an area that's largely Tottenham, live in a Spurs area. We're on the edges of North London. The Spurs ground is 15 minutes down the road. So it's very easy for Orlando, my son, to be attracted to supporting Spurs or Arsenal or something else, because that's who all of his mates support. But he wants to support Forest. And he's been to games with me now. He gets upset if we can't get tickets, and that's a real challenge. And it's amazing to go to a game with my son and pass that baton onto him. So keeping that family tie. I've got cousins that are season ticket holders. My cousin Mick is quite well known in and around West Bridgford. He's got long-standing ties with the club. He was someone I'd always used to meet at away games as I moved into London as a young adult. It was normally away games that I got to more than home games, really, because of where I was living. And always going up to the City Ground was and still is a hugely special moment for me. I get butterflies every time I go to it because it's a regular. It's a regular for me to go to the City Ground. I get butterflies when I go and see them play wherever. I was lucky enough to go and see them at the playoff final against Huddersfield. Quite possibly the best day of my life, apart from my kid being born, as Rocky used to say in the film. But ultimately, everyone's got a Forest story, how it came to them. And there are people that live in and around the city that at the moment, Richard, not just them, but I think of the ones that live close to the City Ground and go to the City Ground. At the moment, it's a very emotive subject that's causing quite a stir. And that is the possibility that Nottingham Forest might leave the City Ground. It's been something that has been floated around a lot more in the last few days than it ever has done before, it seems. Going back a few years, 5 years, the original plans were released that we would redevelop the Peter Taylor stand, as well as do some work on the Bridgford stand and increase the capacity to something like 40,000. And that just seemed like the perfect plan, keeping everything at the City Ground, making sure that we expanded in the right way. And those plans were all systems go as far as we were concerned, only to then never come to fruition. And all of a sudden, it feels and sounds like that possibly could not ever happen. The Danny Taylor article in the Athletic talked about real possibility that the club would now look to go elsewhere, and Toten has been very, very hotly mentioned, and it's really upset a lot of people because the council are coming out and saying that the club have stalled talks. Tom Cartridge saying that the council are the ones that aren't being forthcoming. And now we've got an offer more or less on the table to buy the freehold for 10 million. And just literally in the last 48 hours or so, the owner has effectively come out and said that he really sees the club, Nottingham Forest, only succeeding by moving away from the City Ground to a big 50k stadium. I mean, I've got twisted, conflicted thoughts. My head spins a little bit thinking about it all. What do you think? I think what I want you to do, having listened to all of that, and we've been talking before we came on, I think I'm going to ask you to make the case here and now as to why we must stay at the City Ground.
Yeah, I'm going to begin basically somewhat connecting back to the story in and of itself, because our stories, and certainly my story, does not have, to me, it's intrinsically linked to the City Ground, right? So, there's lots of memories, lots of things that resonate with us. But when I'm talking about my fandom and my love for Nottingham Forest, it does not. You cannot separate that from the experience, that ritual of coming over the Trent Bridge, approaching that ground, the place it has, the visual of seeing it and feeling that excitement about what you're about to enter, which, I don't want to get too overtly religious about it, but it's, and I think Pete Blackburn touched on this in his article too, just yesterday, that it's an experience that's sacred and for lack of a better word, almost like a religious experience, a spiritual experience. And I would say that's true. And so I think the part that I'm struggling with from a reconciliation standpoint, and where I'm headed with what I would say is the case, is that you have every opportunity at this point And I think what came out with that design that came out yesterday, it shows the potential, because what you don't want is to subvert the beautiful and rich history of this club that is being in that place, having those matches on a Saturday, Sunday, during the week, whatever. You don't want that history to be subverted, because if Marinakis is going to say, okay, I reverence the history, I understand the history of the club, then don't sacrifice what is one of the most, you know, essential aspects of that. Do we love the club? Will we love the club? Sure, always love the club. The badge is probably the most important thing, but in the end, the generation that's coming up, don't we want to foster that same opportunity? And I don't know. For me personally, it's hard, because you're talking about 33 years of remembering the smell, the sound, just the aura of that place, and never leaving me. And so yes, it's a head over heart problem, or heart over head rather, scenario, but I think from a development standpoint, there's so much potential there. You get the same end result, which is to expand the stadium, to provide these different amenities, to focus on that. I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly that design, but I love the elements that focus on how embedded it is in the city itself. And we know from an economic standpoint, it clearly has value. And so honor that, retain that, but augment it and enhance it by changing the city ground so that the new generation has the same bones, the skeleton of what was, but something that is more modern, more akin to what I think is the quote unquote Premier League sort of optics of what a stadium should be and how that creates revenue, and generates different kinds of revenue. You can get all that, right? You can get all that and by just redeveloping what is there now. That requires obviously some figuring something out from an interim standpoint so that we can continue to play matches. But I definitely feel like it's probably a little bit less costly from an overall initial upfront cost standpoint, which I know has never been his issue. He's obviously got plenty of money, £3 billion or whatever he's worth today. But at the same time, I think you maintain that trajectory of like, oh, we've got to progress. Oh, we've got to kind of conform to a degree to that Premier League standard. We've got to enhance revenue. We've got to increase revenue so that we can start buying better players. I understand that, but I think you can achieve all that by just doing what you initially intended to do, as you stated 5 years ago, by elevating what that stadium can be, what that ground can be, and allowing this forthcoming generation, this current generation, our kids, right, our sons that we know love this club as well, giving that to them, honoring that, and not sacrificing that, because I realize there's been a public debate for months now that we know will leak over in the offseason. I realize he's very intent, based off of what he said, I'm going to move. But I don't think that's essential, and I do believe what came out yesterday just only emphasizes the fact that there's that possibility, and we don't need to dismiss that, because the only option to allow ourselves that strategic growth is to move it away completely from the city in and of itself, because that to me is just personally is denying, I think, what is one of the most beautiful things and poetic things about what our club is, and maintaining that, connection and relationship to the fan base and to the city in and of itself, which flock to that stadium or that ground, every weekend and during the week when those matches happen during the week. I just don't think it makes sense for the trajectory of the club and the retention of that history and that love that people have for that place, by allowing yourself to just say, okay, my only option is just to spend an exorbitant amount of money, create this complex. But to your point, with the freehold scenario, that also allows us to develop that complex. They can have a more advanced training facility. They can have other elements, right, that can progress you financially without having to change the course of history. I get that he wants to make his mark. I get he wants his own legacy, but I don't think that should be at the cost of what is the most special to us as a fan base holistically.
So, in amongst all of that, the design that you were talking about was something that was featured in the Nottingham Post online, I think it was. I can't remember the guy's name, but there's an architect that came forward with a specific design. So that means then, if we go down that line, that we don't redevelop the Peter Taylor stand and West Bridgeford stand and the Bridgeford stand, sorry. We flatten the city ground and we build again. And in my opinion, that's what I would prefer. I could easily stomach the whole of the city ground being flattened. Ground sharing with Notts County for 2 seasons, which I know I can hear people screaming at me already, but it's only over the river. It's about 21,000 capacity or just under, which means that for a couple of years, we only have 20,000 or 17,000 with away fans as well in the stadium. But it's a small price to pay if you think that a brand new state-of-the-art city ground is going to be built in the current footprint where it is at the moment. So all of that walk over Trent Bridge, all of that legacy, all of that emotive romanticness that's attached to that place stays. But you still get that Premier League stadium. The designs that I saw looked fabulous. The ideas were amazing. I was sold in a heartbeat. I would love nothing more than the freehold to be bought. They flatten the ground. They build again with the brand new stadium that's going to be unbelievable. I think it should be 50,000. I hear people saying, "Oh, do you think we're going to fill 50,000?" Who cares? Don't do 45 or 40 because you're still going to need people that are going to want to come and see games at the City Ground. If you're going to do it, build 50,000 seat stadium because it's going to be used for other things other than football. There's about 12,000 people at the moment on the waiting list for a season ticket. I'm a member. I've got a lower tier member. So because I live further away, so I can kind of get to the games I want to get to, but I still miss out on tickets. I would probably go to more games. So trust me, in the Premier League, there are Forest fans, and I mean real Forest fans, that will go and fill that ground. I've got absolutely no doubt about it. If it's at the City Ground, if it's a 50k stadium that's where it currently is, I've got no doubts, no doubts at all that it would get filled. So that, to me, in amongst everything you said, would be the perfect scenario that it's done there. I don't think it's big enough, Richard, to do a training complex there as well. There's not enough ground there. If you do a 50 brand new stadium, I think the training complex has got to be somewhere else. But I'm getting quite thinking about it, passionate. It's like it's such a no-brainer to me to get the freehold, get the planning. You keep even in those plans, he was even thoughtful about keeping the historic boat clubs there. We're still going to be across the road from Notts County with that connection to them that I love having them just across the river. I think it's brilliant. I love being next to Trent Bridge Cricket Ground as well. It's a hub of sport. So to me, that is the dream scenario. Flatten the city ground, build a brand new one, 50k stadium, in keeping with a Premier League, how it should be, as a Premier League stadium should be. There's Marinakis' legacy in a nutshell there, if you want my opinion. That's what
clearly I agree with you. But what about that other camp? So there's another camp, right, which is more of like, okay, I could sort of accept it. So from your perspective, what about another site that's relatively close to that? Because I think in some of the videos that Matt did, we talked about West Ham, right across the street. I believe the Spurs Stadium's not significantly far away from where they were previously.
The Spurs Stadium is on the same footprint as what White Hart Lane was. Here's the thing. I went to White Hart Lane, and I've been to the new stadium, and the difference is like night and day. I mean, the old stadium had character. It had everything that City Ground's got in terms of experience, but it needed to go, and the new stadium's amazing. I went to Upton Park, and that was, again, that brilliant old-fashioned stadium or ground, and I've been to the soulless London Stadium, and that to me is terrible. I think it's just a terrible place to watch football because I think they got it all wrong by trying to take over a purpose-built athletic stadium. If you're going to do it, you do it properly, and to your point, if there was another space in and around where we are now, the Meadows has been mentioned, or some other ground to the side of Meadow Lane's been mentioned. If they can go there, then I think that Forest fans would go for that as well, don't you?
Oh, I agree. Yeah, because it still retains the same, I think, reverence and heart, right? Because that's the essential nature of it. I think the Totten thing, as you know, I've talked about off air. I think that at the core, that it really feels like you're both physically and sort of, I hate to use the word spiritually, but emotionally, you're disconnecting yourself from what was, right? You're really creating separation between that period of time and what is now, and we don't want to separate that. We don't. I love that in the current design the design that Matt Druitt, I think his name is, Matt Druitt created, was that there's all these accents and reference points, right? There's all these call outs to the things that are essential to our history. You know, Peter Taylor and statues of him and Brian Clough, accents to the badge, you know, in terms of the wavy lines,
Mate,
you know,
pushes
the
all
boathouse. It
It's
does
unbelievable.
in every way, 100%.
Look, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
I
you're
get
good.
so carried away, but I get carried away because I looked at those designs and I was like, my God, this looks unbelievable. What I'm going to try and do now is going to be something really difficult. So bear with me. Having said everything I've just said and fully agreed with everything you just said, what I'm going to try and do now is make a, oh God, this is going to be really difficult. I'm going to try and make a case for the club to move fully away from the City ground. And I guess I don't want them to go to Toten. I think that would be a disaster. But let's just say that they secure Toten and Marinakis and the club decide that is the way forward. I'm going to try and make a case for that being a positive thing. I don't like it. It's not what I want. So before anyone comes back to me and says, oh, Greg thinks that we should move away from the City ground. No, I don't. I don't think that at all. I think we should stay at the City ground. I think we should have a brand new City ground. But if we're going to go, if he's going to do it, let's try and think of the positives. Having a multi-million, billion-pound, whatever it will be, 50K stadium with transport links that are apparently really good there, that was going to be the HS2 site, that will probably have a world-class campus in and around it with the training facility, housing the men's, the women's, the academy, all under one complete umbrella. That's really attractive. I like the sound of that. The revenue that we need, I think, from having a stadium that's that size is crucial, because you have to compete now on so many levels. I'm only saying stuff that everyone else has been saying, but I'll repeat it, that, you know, you've got to cut your cloth accordingly. And when your cloth is only so big, it means that you're only going to go so far. A lot of people don't seem to understand the concept that things like European football and progressing are linked intrinsically to capacity and ground size. If you have a stadium that can generate far more revenue on a match day, because you've got a lot more people coming through the gate, and I'm not just talking about the price of a ticket. The guy that was on with Matt Davies on his Forest Focus pod earlier in the week from Tottenham said something really interesting. And that was another great episode from Matt. He did such a great job of really getting into some of the other fans and their views. So, Matt, if you're listening to this, that was fantastic, mate. And we all absolutely loved what you did there. And the guy from Spurs was saying that people were coming to the ground 2 hours earlier and they were staying an hour late. And that just resonated with me so much, thinking if people make the journey out to Toten, then it's a day out. They're going out there. They're going to get in there early. There's going to be bars, food, restaurants, music, entertainment on site for people to go and enjoy, fan parks, all that kind of stuff. So you've got people on site generating more revenue for the club. You've got the price of the ticket, you've got the merchandise, you've got the shirts, you've got everything else that goes with it as well. And then you've got the people staying an hour, hopefully an hour or more later as well, because it's going to be so unbelievably good to go and do that. So if Toten can produce an experience like that, then that could only be a positive thing. And that revenue then that's coming into the club, it means that you can buy that better player. You don't have to sell. Don't forget, it's not about who you can buy, it's about who you can keep hold of as well. You know, if we sell Murillo in the summer, which I think we're going to have to, it's only because we need to meet PSR regulations. Now, if we've got money, then you don't need to sell, and you can then expand and grow. Your team grows with the better players in it. If we're forever getting rid of our players, our better players, because we have to bow down to these PSR regulations, then we're going to stand still. And when you stand still, you don't progress. And when you don't progress, you don't go into Europe, etc., etc., etc. Okay? So that's why there's a really good possibility of us getting into those higher positions when you've got more money in your back pocket. And I know it's such an obvious thing to say, and there'll be people listening saying, yeah, that's obvious. But there's a lot of people I see on Twitter that are coming up with comments that it doesn't seem like it is obvious at all. So having a bigger stadium is vital, no matter how we do it. I can see going to Toten has got positives to it. People don't like change. The here and now people, you and me, but not so much you and me, because we live away from the city. The ones that go over that bridge every week, or over Lady Bay Bridge, or from other parts of the city and the surrounding area, they're the ones that are going to feel it a lot more. And I do think about those people because they're the ones that are going to miss out on that match day experience. So when that change happens, it'll be a big change for them. But ultimately, you know what? In 10 years' time or less, the new influx of fans that are growing into the club, that we're going to pass on that legacy to our children, and then in 20 years' time, their children, they're going to know no different. They're going to know only an amazing campus, an amazing stadium, amazing complex that we have now got for our club. And it will be the way it's always been for them. So the moment of change in the here and now is always tough. And if we're the ones that have to go through it, we won't like it, but it's something you're just going to have to suck it up and get on with. What I noticed on Twitter was there are a lot of varying opinions out there. Okay. Holly said the City Ground and the River Trent is so deeply woven into our history and identity. Moving away would literally mean ripping up our entire existence and starting again. Might as well call ourselves East Midlands Albion or some bleep like that. This really can't happen. Another one, Tom, to me, it won't feel like moving the club to Toten. It'll feel like building a new club and stealing my club's history, name and badge. Forest Review, all this talk about needing a massive stadium to progress is nonsense. Just a reminder, Bournemouth are a mid-table Premier League side with a stadium capacity of 12,000. Although I do think, and I believe that Bournemouth are looking to move as well. And that goes back to my point I was just making. If you're going to stand still, you're going to stand still and you're not going to go anywhere. So I disagree with that. I think a new stadium, a bigger stadium is needed. Justin says, one thing this news has shown was the club clearly manufactured a row with Nottingham City Council. A ground move was always the agenda. The council were an easy scapegoat. Tom Wiggum Charm, he's someone I follow on Twitter and love reading his tweets. He's really got a lot of good things to say and puts it so well. And he says, taking us 6 miles away to Toten will be the biggest unsolicited moving of a football club since Wimbledon were hijacked and relocated to Milton Keynes. This cannot happen to Nottingham Forest. It would not be progress. It would be the systematic destruction of our core identity. Premier League Reds, they've got a lot to say under their account on Twitter. Bunch of lies and broken promises. No respect for the Forest fans at all. Just wants to keep milking us dry. Goes on to say that price hikes to watch matches. Now they're moving us to Toten. Binning the City Ground our home. They're a disgrace. A bit of a conflicting view from the watcher. Embrace change. An opportunity to create a new history, a legacy for future generations. World-class facilities, compete with the best. We just need to locate the right site. And I think that is going to be the key, Richard, as well. And this goes back to what we were talking about just a moment earlier. M. Routledge on Twitter says, why not develop the City Ground in phases over time? Rebuild the Peter Taylor stand, stay in the Premier League. Then you could do the redevelopment of the Bridgeford stand and maybe have a whole double-tiered section. We perhaps would be mid-table by that point, fill in the corners when we're around top 6 and then rebuild the stuff I beg your pardon, we'll rebuild the Clough stand. And that hopefully will see us hitting that top 3, which is obviously a dream for all of us. And then finally, Evangelos Marinakis, in his interview, the words that he used and from that interview were, when it comes to leaving the City Ground, that it will change the history in years to come of the region and the team for our supporters. It will be hard to leave the City Ground, but in an age when revenue streams dictate success on the pitch, there's no doubt moving to a bigger facility will set the club on the right path. Now, lots of passionate opinions there. I think in a nutshell that you and I are on the same page. I don't want to move to Toten. I hope the club don't do it. I think it's too far out. I think that atmosphere that we've got at the City Ground can stay the same, even if it's a new building. If it's a new City Ground done in the right way, then I think we can still maintain that passionate atmosphere that we've got at the moment. I just hope they get it right.
Absolutely.
Right. Hopefully, you will have seen us on Twitter, and you would have seen us possibly over on TikTok as well. Just realised that my mic goes off when that comes on. We hope that you subscribe. I'll do that again. Do that again. Like and subscribe. Thanks,
thank you, Jimmy.
much.
Thanks, Jimmy,
Yeah.
and FSC for creating that. It's fantastic.
Yeah, as I say, Nottingham Forest, Jimmy, the man behind those amazing tunes on Twitter, was so kind to produce that slide for us. And I'm still going to try and entice him on to come on as a guest at some point. But for now, he's just going to stay behind the tunes, I think. So, Richard, over to you. The lightning round.
The lightning round. Yeah, if you guys are familiar with Friends, we have a great appreciation for Friends on our podcast. So we are now going to be shifting into what we call the lightning round, which is essentially 10 questions, right? And in this case, we're going to put Greg on the spot, and Greg's got to answer those 10 questions in 5 minutes. So we got to be quick, succinct, but we want to get to know you a little bit better, sir. So, all right, let's go. Let's kick it off.
Okay.
What was your first Forest match live?
So when we were living on the South Coast, when I was very small, I was taken to the Dell. Forest were playing away at Southampton. It was 1982/83, and Forest won 1-0. It was a Gary Birtles goal. I remember it clearly. I can still picture it now. Peter Shilton was in goal for Southampton because he had left us the season before. We had Hans van Breukelen in goal for us. And yeah, that was an amazing experience to see Forest first time in the flesh. It wasn't in the City Ground, so my first match live was away at the Dell, and it was amazing.
All right, what is your favorite Forest player of all time?
There's so many amazing players that we've had down the years, but for me, the standout person hit just as I was in my younger sort of teens through until I was becoming a young adult. And he's the person that epitomizes passion, fight, a real footballer. And it can only really be the one and only Stuart Pearce.
Which player in Forest history would you like to see on the current squad?
For me, apart from Stuart Pearce, of course, I'll say someone different because I think we need a goal scorer who's going to stay fit and he's going to rip it up. And in the time that he was with us, he was in his pomp. He tore defences apart. He scored a load of goals for us. And his name is Stanley Victor Collymore.
What is your favorite away or third kit?
Favorite away kit probably goes back to the sort of 94 season. I think it was 94, 95. The blue Labatt's away kit that had a kind of the sort of light green shorts. That to me is a classic away kit. I'll put a third in as well if I've got time. Going back 2 or 3 seasons when we're in the Championship, the club released the grey camouflage third kit, which had all the sort of camo leaves going through it. I really liked that shirt, and as soon as I saw it, I think I was one of the first to buy it straight away and take my money quickly. So yeah, those two always stood out. I think what I'm going to do on the pot, I've got a load of shirts. I think I'm going to wear a different shirt per episode, probably.
Brilliant. If you weren't a Forest fan, what club would you support?
I can't answer that. I don't think anyone could answer that, can they? If I weren't a Forest fan, I wouldn't support any team. I just couldn't do it. Or maybe where I live in Cheshunt, there's a club here. I'd go and watch them. They're in the National League South. I've been to a couple of games up there just on non-league day, which has been really fun. I could see that if I'd never been a Forest fan ever, it possibly could have been Portsmouth or Southampton because of where I lived as a kid. If I was coming to football for the first time now, having never supported a club ever, then I could probably see myself being a Spurs fan, only because we live in a Spurs area. The new Tottenham ground is 15 minutes away on the train from literally outside my front door. And so having a team on your doorstep that I've never had could be quite interesting. And they're a Premier League side, and Brennan Johnson plays for them. So I'd probably choose Spurs if I had to, in terms of a brand new club now. But if it was Forest going out of existence today, then I would not support another team apart from my local non-league side, I think.
You had to spend one day with a fan from a team you despise/dislike. What team would that be?
Probably Luton. I only kind of despise/dislike them a little bit, and that's because they became quite good at stirring things up over the rivalry. I do have a really good friend who is a Luton fan, and he's going to come on to hopefully one of our later episodes because he actually has got a background working as an official, a referee/assistant referee in the English Football League. So it'd be really good to get his take on a few things. So his name's Gavin Huge. He's going to hopefully join us for one of our episodes coming up. But I wouldn't choose him. That guy that was on with Matt Davies on the opposition view on Forest Focus, I think his name is Ollie. He turned out to be a little bit of a buffoon. I'd quite happily spend some time with him. I don't think I'd want to do a day. We can maybe do a couple of hours with a few pints and chew the fat, and I can put him right in a few things.
I think we'd all enjoy that. What is your favorite Forest moment or memory?
This is probably an easy one. My dad came and picked me up from school. I went to boarding school just outside Ipswich. It was a naval boarding school. We're not posh or anything, I promise you that. But it was a naval boarding school that I went to, and my dad came all the way up from Gosport, picked me up. He must have been on the road from 4 or 5 in the morning, got to the school at 9 a.m., picked me up, and then took me down on the train then from Ipswich to Wembley for the 1990 League Cup final where we beat Oldham 1-0. It was an amazing day out. We won the game. It was a real father-son moment, a real father-son day. It was something that I've always looked back on fondly, and just purely because I believe in family, I believe in that legacy we talked about, sharing that day with him, seeing our team win. We hugged, we embraced. It was so magical. It was the best day ever. And then he had to take me all the way back to boarding school and get himself in the car and get home. By the time he got home, I think he'd literally been awake and on the road traveling for 24 hours. So, I always think of that and just love that we had that day together.
Fantastic. Apart from Cloughy Cooper, who is your favorite Forest manager?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, Cloughy obviously is the best of all time. Cooper we love. Apart from those two, favorite Forest manager, I'd probably say, I think I might say Dave Bassett. I like Dave Bassett as a character. I think he did good things for our club. He got us out of the Championship as well. And I think he was a good manager for Forest with a good team. And so I look back on his tenure with fond memories. Notable honourable mention for Frank Clark, of course, but that's more obvious. But so I say Dave Bassett.
If we could sign one player from a non-top six side, who would it be?
From a non-top six side, okay,
Yep.
so I'd probably say Dominic Solanke from Bournemouth. I like him as a player. He scores goals. He's really been good for them this season. If we could have him in our team, I think we'd be really doing well. So, yeah, Dominic Solanke.
Fantastic. And that was our first rendition of Lightning Round. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Wow. Didn't expect some of those questions, but thanks for that, mate. Look forward to getting that segment done again in future episodes with more guests down the line. So, time's moving on. I want to speed things up a little bit, mate. Looking at next season, it's been really tough this time round. It's been a lot worse this season than I thought it was going to be. So much has happened. I love Steve Cooper, as loads of people did. And when we lost him, it was a really tough moment. We'd been united for so long, getting us back into the Premier League. Then we've had the whole PSR and points deduction saga, the appeal process, the issues with referees and VAR, the appointment of Mark Clattenburg. In amongst that, a never-ending relegation battle. We just couldn't get away from Luton, who kept losing, but we just couldn't get away from them. Not because they were good, but we were just poor. We were just poor. And now that we have gotten over the line just about having the results go our way, really. I know we didn't beat Chelsea, and I really felt we should have done. But with Luton losing and with Burnley going down as well, that goal difference is just too insurmountable. So we are safe. We can look ahead to another Premier League season for Nottingham Forest next time round. So let's hear what your view is on next season. What are you hoping for, mate?
So I got a top 5 wish list, right? So,
Okay.
yep. So the first one, which you kind of alluded to just now, because it was a 4-point swing for us, right? And I think beyond just it being a 4-point swing, it was a massive distraction and created, just a much tougher road than it needed to be and induced too much stress for all involved. I think Nuno touched on it multiple times. Ola Aina touched on it as well, which is just get out of that pitfall and that trap of PSR, right? Unfortunately, we're going to have to, there's a number of contracts that we're losing at the end of the season. Harry Arter being at the top of that list for different reasons than just monetary, right? But just the principle of having to carry that for so long. But aside from that, we've also got to unfortunately sell an asset, and that asset likely is going to be Murillo. So that's devastating because of what he's meant to the club this year and how quickly and how brilliantly he's assimilated. But that's number one. Number two, field your best 11 with slight gestures of change as needed or as injuries occur, but be consistent with your midfield and center back pairing. Because one of the frustrating parts was we felt like we could see it. We felt like we had the best 11, right? And of course, it's gonna ebb and flow, especially considering what Ryan Yates brings to the team. And so, how are you going to utilize him next year? What is that going to look like if we do somehow change that midfield pairing? And I think that leads to number 3. The real Ibrahim Sangari reemerges. We want to see the guy that we all thought he was going to be. Right? That has to be a part of the equation. If it is a part of the equation, we've got that stopper. We've got that guy that has a little bit more dynamism. He's got goals in him. He's certainly got international experience that a Yates doesn't have. You pair him with Danilo, I think as well as potentially bringing a new striker, you've got a much better spine as well as a new center back. So hopefully that's on the horizon. Reduce the set piece debacle. This is an obvious low-hanging fruit moment, right? So, and I say reduce it 25 to 30%. I work in business. It's a margin by an aggregation by marginal degrees for improvements, right? Get a little bit better here and there everywhere, but especially in this area because we gave up roughly. If you go back and look at all the set piece goals that we gave up, the end results of those set piece those matches, you're looking at about 31 points that we lost, right? So think of that. That's enormous. So if you only say, okay, I'm going to go for 25, 30%, we'll say 30%, then you're talking about a 10-point swing. That we're closer to 40 points. You add in the PSR, we're at 43, which means we're right about where Brentford is. We're around 15th or 16th. It's not a huge shift, but think about that. That's progression. So I think that's we got to see that. And by virtue of all of that, to me, that organically means I've now got more consistent performance, right? I've got less shooting yourself in the foot moments, self-inflicted wound moments, and I'm going to be inching my way towards what I think we all expect, which is that mid-table glory, right? That mid-table position. The Crystal Palace model, although, latter part of the season, they've been phenomenal, but that
Yeah,
concept of being a Crystal Palace, right? Or a Fulham or a Bournemouth or someone in that vein. So those are my top five. That's what I have to see next season.
fantastic. I love it. I mean, there's not much I can add to that really. Everything's on your wish list. I'd imagine that every single person who's a Forest fan would want that as well. I think that the thing that a few keywords I suppose I'll use: stability. Anyone that's locked into some of my comments on Forest Focus or see me after the Crystal Palace match, I said then that I didn't want Nuno Espirito Santo to be the manager next season, regardless of whether we stayed up or not. And I got some pelters for that, which is fine. I'm not going to be hiding behind anything I've said previously. But I'm fully aware that stability is important. And so I'm not going to be, getting too upset and crying if he is our manager, which I expect him to be. I think I probably expect him to be the manager come the start of the new season. I'm 80% sure that he will be. I'm only 20% thinking that Marinakis might pull the trigger because that's what he's like. And if that's the case, then it's what I had called for, and it's what I think I probably would still call for. If you ask me outright, I think we can do better. And I'm not really a fan of Espirito Santo's strategies. I know he's had a lot on his plate. I get that. I know that he's coming to the club at a difficult time. We've had a points deduction and stuff like that. But at the same time, there's things that he could have fixed that would have meant we were clear long ago. The reason why Luton, people said how well Luton have done, and it's just nonsense. Luton did not do well. They kept losing games. The only reason why there was no bigger gap is because we kept losing as well, or throwing away points from set pieces that you've touched on. If he'd fixed some of that this season, which he should have done, then we would have been clear ages ago. There's been a set piece coach in the building for God knows how long that apparently he's not using. Why not? Why the hell not? Are you not reaching out to this guy to make us even 5% better on what you were saying about differentials? 5% better would have meant maybe an extra point or two this time round. And I think he's the manager. It stops with him. And when you consistently pick Origi, and when for that spell of games, he benched Alanga, he benched Hudson-Odoi. Everyone's saying, why are you not playing that front three with Morgan Gibbs-White behind? Like you said, we could all see it, but he just consistently picked what turned out to be the wrong players. Niakate left back away at Villa was a disaster. And there's other examples of
Crystal
that as well.
Palace
Where I just feel like,
subs.
yeah, exactly. And the Crystal Palace subs, the Liverpool subs as well. I think calling into question where we were going. The Luton subs away. I know I was at the first game when we conceded late for them to come back from 2-0 down, but they did it again away at Luton. We had 3 points in our hands, and for me, a lot of that's on Nuno, which is why I said after the Palace game, because I was really frustrated that we should have won that game. And we should have won the Luton game. Brilliant against Fulham, but that was 45 minutes of brilliance. Second half, we had our moments, but, had Sells not made that amazing save, that would have been 3-2. And you just know that Fulham would have got a third goal. I'm telling you now, I think all Forest fans know. So it can't just be 45 minutes of amazing football and then just cling on and hope for the best. So I do think there's better out there. But like I said, in amongst all of my rambling there, what I'm trying to say is I think Nuno will be the manager. And if he is the manager, I'm fully behind him. He's got my support. 100 million gazillion % of he's got my support. And let's have that stability and hopefully he'll learn from his mistakes. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to be better with a pre-season under his belt. He's going to be better with some more of his own players coming in. He's going to be better just because he's been at the club for a long time. Not a long time, sorry. A longer time. So that stability for me next season is really important. And so hopefully we can address those on-field matters, set pieces, and so on, and we can have decisions that clearly should go our way. So less referee and VAR mistakes, because there's been a multitude of them. I'm not one for conspiracy theories. I just think they're bad at their job. Howard Webb should be resigning. He is the one that's in charge of the PGMOL, and it's a disgrace the amount of decisions across the Premier League that have happened, that you look at them and you think it's a head scratcher time and time again. How? It's because they're inept. It's either the training isn't there, the message isn't there, poor refereeing across the board. Anthony Taylor's supposed to be one of our best. It's terrible. Can't just be that everyone wants Michael Oliver in charge because he's good. They need to have all of them good. So-called best league in the world? No. The best league in the world would go out to the world and would hire and recruit the very best from all corners of the world. You know, why does it have to be that all referees are English? The players mostly aren't English. The managers mostly aren't English. You got foreign imports across football, across the whole pyramid of football. Why do we have to stick with just having English referees if they're that bad? Go and get someone from Brazil or from Poland or from wherever. As long as they're good and they can do the job. You know, it's just people that are inept behind that screen or on that pitch. No conspiracies. No one doing it deliberately. They're just bad at their job. So next season, decisions in our favour that should be in our favour. Stability and set pieces sorted to a certain degree. That's my wish list. Right. We are just past the hour mark, mate. I want to swiftly move on. One feature that we're going to be having pop up regularly across our episodes is something called NFR, not Forest related. We want to have the freedom to talk about things that aren't related to Nottingham Forest as well, just for 5-10 minutes or so. And it could be something different every week. We will have guests on that are non-Forest guests, but we'll link it into the club where we can. But it's interesting to get different viewpoints. And for this segment this week, I wanted to talk about the clip that went out on social media last week, Richard, from the Wolves Twitter account, from the Wolves club, in fact, the whole club, which was the suicide mental health video clip. And when I saw this, it absolutely stopped me in my tracks. Like it did so many thousands of people that saw it. That 10 minutes was absolutely amazing in terms of its impact, in terms of its message, in terms of what it has done to really make the topic of suicide and poor mental health so prevalent in people's minds. The image of that Wolves fan with the scarf wrapped around his head, covering his eyes, you could see the placard he was holding. He was talking about suicide rates in men and women under a certain age. And to slowly but surely see people stop and interact with him was quite unbelievable, actually. The first person was an older gentleman, if I remember rightly, who just wanted to say that his daughter had a failed attempt at suicide. And I think that gentleman just wanted that human connection in that moment, just to say it, just to convey his experience of someone attempting that. And then you saw other people coming up for a hug, a pat on the back, words of encouragement. And that really is what football's all about for me. Football brings people together. And doesn't matter if you're wearing a Wolves shirt, a Liverpool shirt, a Forest shirt, or even a Derby shirt, any person, we're all the same. And seeing that message made me think about people that I've lost to suicide. I've known a couple of people in my life that felt that they couldn't continue. And I just wish, beyond all wishes, that they could have taken a moment to think about the impact it would have, and that they had talked to someone. And talking and listening, sharing your thoughts and what you're going through, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, guys. I've had my own self-doubt moments. I lost my sister in a car accident in 2009, which rocked my world completely. And then I lost my mum 4 years later, and I wasn't over my sister's death. And when my mum went, it completely and utterly nearly destroyed me. And I'm not shy to say that I had dark thoughts in my head, but I got through it, and I talked to friends, and I'm here. And if we on this podcast, Richard and I, can in any way, shape, or form humbly put ourselves forward as ambassadors for mental health, then we're here to do that. What I learned from the last 5-6 years of watching Garibaldi Red when it first started and then became Forest Focus was how much that podcast improved my mental health beyond all recognition. Being away from anyone else who's a Forest fan, apart from my dad, of course, who lives a few doors down now, being away from anyone else, not getting a chance to speak about the club I love, was something that I just had to live with. But then all of a sudden, having the Forest Focus podcast as it is now, and being able to comment along with people, get to know people in the comments, interact with Matt and all the guys on that podcast, it's just been absolutely amazing for my mental health. I look forward to that every day, and I watch it still. As I said earlier, we will continue to watch that. We're members of that podcast. That's not going to change because it's done so much for my mental health as well, and it's meant that I've got something that's really important to me. And so, as I say to anyone listening, if you've got any kind of thoughts going through your head and if you're struggling, please speak to a friend, a family member, a wife, a partner. If you want to reach out to someone you don't know, my DMs on Twitter are open. You might think there's never in a million years you want to speak to me, and that's fine. But I just want you to know that you're not alone, that we here on Talking Reds, we hope that you enjoy listening to us and rumble on a little bit, and you want someone to say, come and join us. Like as I said to you earlier, we're going to be reaching out to all kinds of different people. And if you want to come on and join us, then we're all for that as well. So we hope that you can take some comfort in what we do. I want to mention also the other Forest podcasts that I've listened to, Forest All Over, Forever Forest, Matt Ford's Reservoir Red Dogs that was out previously, as well as Miss Rolling In. I think Red Side of the Trend. All of them do amazing things. Okay. I can't tell you guys how fantastic it is to get the content from you guys, to listen to what you've got to say. It brings people together, and that is the most important thing of all. It brings the Forest fan base together, and that is what we want more than anything. And if we can be part of that in any way, shape, or form, then we just want to be part of hopefully bringing people together. Agree with us, disagree with us, like us, hate us, but just interact with us and get on board with the message that we want Forest to do well. And if it helps your mental health in any way, shape, or form, then we'll be overjoyed about that. That Wolves suicide message was unbelievable. So I want to say thank you to Wolves and for putting that video together. I say not Forest related, but I suppose I have kind of related it back to what we do in some kind of way. But well done, Wolves, for what you did with that video. And we're fully behind the message. Thanks ever so much for that. What do you think, Richard?
No, I'd agree with that. I don't know how much I can add to it other than, you and I have spoken about our own personal battles, which we're happy to have conversations with folks about because connectedness is important. Not feeling alone is important, which is what they really centered on in that video. I think it was incredible that they kind of capped that video off with talking about how far that really went for people, in the sense that there was people that approached him who literally said, I need help. And so being present, being open, being willing to stay vigilant and available for people is so critical. And I know for both of us, we were messaging back and forth through WhatsApp saying the emotional nature of that was so overwhelming in a way that was good, because it helps us stay focused on how essential and critical it is to have those conversations, how critical it is to to want to reach out to people for help, but also to be available to help. You and I are not professionals in this area, right? But we're
Right.
certainly a listening ear, and we're certainly a willing ear and heart to have those conversations and be there for people, as you talked about and touched on. So I really appreciate that you wanted to make this and it's a very important part of what we talked about today. And we're certainly, as you stated, always open through messaging or any other way that we can be to try to help and be there for individuals, because we all want joy and we want hope, and that's what we want to try to provide for others as well, both in our individual lives as well as through this mechanism that is Talking Red. So thank you, Greg. Appreciate that.
Thanks, mate. Fantastic. Okay, we're at the end, and we've gone just past an hour and 10 in this pre-recorded add-on to the live episode 1 we did with Matt Davies. So we're going to move on to some final thoughts. Richard, anything you want to say before we go, buddy?
No, just looking forward to the next week. Looking forward to the conclusion of the season, which I think we'll all agree has been a bit of a process, a bit of a I don't know how to explain it other than a journey, just a stress-induced journey at times with some euphoria sprinkled in. But I'm grateful for this forum, grateful for the opportunity to reach out to and have conversations and communication with the fan base as a whole. There's to be a part of sort of a growing American, I guess, for lack of better. I mean, I'm born in the UK, British by DNA and literal birth. But I'm happy to be, along with NFFC all over, to really help elevate the joy that is following this club, the love that we can have for this club, the great club that it is, seeing more people gravitate towards that and finding more people over here that have the same passion and the same emotional connection to the club. And so continuing to looking forward to it, enhancing that and being participating in that, as well as all the wonderful people over in the UK and other parts of the world that love what Forest is and what it can be. So thank you.
Fantastic. I think that just about sums everything up. I've got nothing else I want to add, really, other than if you've been listening to this, thank you so much for joining us and helping us get our first episode and companion episode to that off and underway. I'm going to hit the slide now for like and subscribe. So it's going to go quiet. Here it comes. In fact, I don't think that was going to go quiet. I think my mic was still alive. I could have talked. I could have said something. If you saw the slide, it was asking you to hit like and subscribe so you can find us for future episodes. We're going to be releasing everything onto iTunes and to Spotify as well. So coming up next time, we will have a guest joining us. It will be a fan straight out of the fan base to come on and join Richard and I, where we will have a chat about the latest offerings from Forest. Looking forward as well to this Sunday and the last game of the season. If you're traveling to Burnley, travel safely. I was fortunate enough to go to the last game of the season at Palace last year, which was the best party atmosphere I've ever been to. It was unreal. So I think we can have a party. And if you're going, have a great time, travel safely. I think the message is going out on social media to try and get everyone to dress up as a referee. So if you're in the party spirit and you want to dress up as a referee to join in on the fun, then go ahead and do that. But in the meantime, that's all from here at us at Talking Reds, and we hope you'll join us next time. Take care, and we'll see you soon.